We are going to dive into the world of indie games, how to curate talent, diversify funding, and build meaningful co-development partnerships. Again, if you could stop talking, and if you are talking, move out. Trying to be very nice to do this, but please. Thank you. That was lovely. Yeah.
You're putting
thank
it
you.
down.
Woo! So welcome, Justin Woodward of Media India Exchange and Dean Takahashi. Thanks.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. So our session today is game funding diversification for indies. Glad to be here with Justin Woodward, who has a long history in the game industry, and I'm going to have him go through some of it here. You want to talk to us about how you got going in the indie space, really?
You want me to jump in?
Yeah,
immediately?
Yeah.
All right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've been in the game industry for about 15 years now. I started, I went to college for game art and design, went to AAA shortly after that as a 3D background artist. And after that, I really did not, during that time, I really didn't dig being a 3D artist. I wanted to be a designer. That's what I went to school for, and a producer. So as I started to figure out my own path, I started a graphic design studio where I utilized that to do graphic design, websites, and logo design to entrepreneurs in order to learn how to fund projects, learn how to create businesses, that kind of thing. And then right around that time when I started the graphic design business, I started my master's program in game production and management and started an independent game studio.
And when did you actually encounter that first need to go and get some money from somebody?
That was like I was super broke, so I was like sleeping on the floor. It was crazy during my master's program, and then I was like looking into what does it take to have angel investment, and this was like 2009, around that time, and Kickstarter just started, and we were one of the first Kickstarters, and we failed, which was very interesting, but every time there was an opportunity, we utilized that pitch to push it further. All the folks that took me under their wing, I utilized their mentorship to learn more. So at the time, I grew up in San Diego, so there was High Moon Studios, Rockstar San Diego, there's PlayStation, Sony San Diego, and one of my mentors was Clinton Keith, who was like the grandfather of Agile Scrum. So he took me to leadership workshops. If you guys remember, if you're OG, I'm saying I'm OG now, even though I may not look it. But they had these things called the leadership forums. So he would take me, and I would work with like folks from EA, Ubisoft, all of these different like AAA companies, and I would teach them Agile Scrum. So I would learn that, as I was, teaching. And then he was introducing me to other folks. Like, I was a big fan of Oddworld Inhabitants, so I got to meet Lorne Lanning, which was super crazy to me, in person. He was such a cool guy. And then it was like I just got the confidence to feel like I could do this. You know what I'm saying?
But who was the person who actually gave you the break or gave you the money?
Oh, the money. Oh, my bad. Okay. So, yeah, it's just such a long, yeah. So I got into, we were pitching the same game. We pitched to Kickstarter. Then we moved on to Nexon. Nexon was trying to get into indie stuff. And then this thing opened up called the IGN Indie Open House in 2000 and around the end of 2010, 2011. And I did not have money to go. I'm in San Diego. I have this beat up old Nissan Altima and, was sleeping on the floor. And one of my mentors who I met, I was doing all of her work. She's from Venezuela. She was doing a lot of wealthing type of programs. So I was editing her videos, and she said, if you take this opportunity to go up to San Francisco, if you get in, I will give you $2,000, which you will have to pay me back. And so we ended up on one of the leadership forum trips, which was really interesting. I was already in San Francisco, so I connected with the folks at IGN, and I was like, hey, I'm in town. Can I meet you in person and pitch in person? And they loved the idea, and they basically gave me a week. They said, you have to make a decision to come up here in a week. And I said, is housing included? Is any financials included? They said nothing. So I went to Alicia and I went to Clint and I said, what do you think I should do? And Clint was like, he said, you got to take the bull by the balls and just make this shit happen, right? And I was like, okay. And then Alicia said, I'll give you $2,000. And then so we just packed our stuff and then drove up to the Bay with nothing. We didn't know what was going to happen, anything like that. I was able to convince, since I was at IGN, to write blog pieces for my college for an additional $2,000 a month. So then that helped me get rent. While I was up there for 3 months, I learned, I think it's through 47 Communications, I learned how to talk to the press, how to talk in front of people. And then we showed at GDC, and we just had a bunch of people come and check out the game. And then Alicia became the first investor. She invested $40,000. And then Adam took me under his wing at Beefy Media before he was at PlayStation, and Adam Boyes. And then he was like taking me to Capcom, and he was taking me to Konami and all these different places to pitch. So I started getting the confidence to pitch. And then the next thing you know, the next step was I got a deal with Adult Swim Games, which that kind of pushed it over the top. And then I really understood how to get my grounding in funding.
And then I guess what were some observations just about the indie ecosystem that you encountered over time? Like I think, San Francisco in some ways became a mecca for indies, but as things like even the .com boom happened, like the prices here got so expensive that the indies were priced out of the city, right? And they had to go into the rest of Oakland and other places in the Bay, right? And there's like always been this sort of larger pattern that's affected indies and whether or not they're viable or not viable, I guess.
It was very interesting during that time, and you see this when you're in the business long enough, you see the cycles of where things are going. And at that time, it was social gaming, so everyone was doing Facebook games and what other High Five. It was so random. I don't know if you remember High Five, but and then it was
social gaming was the actual reason why GamesBeat and its first conference took off.
Really?
Right? Yeah,
That's
because
amazing.
like companies like Zynga were around and all the others
Yeah.
competing with them. Shervin Pishevar's company and all these social gaming folks were there because I left my job. I figured I was never going to cover games again because I was going to VentureBeat that covered startups, right? And there were no game startups at the time, but all of a sudden, social gaming.
Yeah, so this is weird transition in that time with social gaming and also indie development. And they were, so for instance, for the IGN Indie Open House, it was actually GameSpy, which was, it was a publication, but they also did back-end multiplayer work. So they work with like Iron Galaxy, they work with Nintendo, they did all of this stuff. That was actually their what is it called? Indie Open House Accelerator, right? Like they were trying to get information for indies, what's next, because they felt that indies were going to be the next big thing, which they were. So like Super Meat Boy was blowing up, Fez, all of these huge breakouts in the indie space, along with the technology with Unity really becoming popular and Unreal really working for indies. It just created this kind of landmark event. And it was like San Francisco definitely was a mecca for that. And with what kind of you're talking about social gaming, there were also a lot of layoffs. It was moving towards mobile. If they didn't make that shift, there are a lot more amazing, talented developers who wanted to start their own studios.
Yeah. Yeah, in a lot of ways, like sometimes everybody questioned whether that new trend was really going to take off or not. But if it inspired all of these investors to pour money into the game industry, then it turned out to be a good thing to get that money, take that money, and do what you could with it. And social gaming was a wave, mobile gaming was a wave. Even more modern times, we had blockchain gaming. All of these things saved a lot of game companies from going under. And even sometimes if they really didn't want to do a blockchain game or something, right? So interesting that trend has always been there. There's always been this fear, too, everybody's had of the indie apocalypse as well, right? And
I don't think it's real.
did you feel
I
that
hear
you
people
never
saying-
believed in the indie
I think
apocalypse?
it's BS. Like, because everyone's scared of all this stuff, but you have to know how to. I hustle, so like you have to know how to move around. Like you just said, every time there's a wave, you could ride that wave for funding, right? Like around the time when we were starting, it was like right when the PS4 was just getting its feet. And they needed content because a AAA, it was taking so long for them to make first-party games. The budgets were ballooned, and like it just the length it took. They were like, okay, we're gonna jump into indie. So then they started to invest in indie. So it was like, okay, now they're, and then it was also PlayStation Mobile. They had their little mobile device, and they were like putting $40K into every project, and then. PlayStation was dropping checks for like $200,000, right? Every wave kind of has this, and you're talking about blockchain too, which is interesting. We can talk about that later, but that has also shifted. Now, blockchain, since it kind of, fell off, they're now investing in traditional web too. So you just have to know how to like ride that wave.
And AI as well, right? Yeah. So we have to live up to the billing of our session here, and so where's the money now? Where is the hidden money? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you just kind of have to know where to look. I mean, that's like I guess it's pretty obvious. Like I just mentioned, like blockchains. A lot of folks who had blockchain money, they still have the money, but they're looking to invest it in different ways. When a lot of publishers, got bought up, Embracer, Xbox, that type of thing. Some of those companies got let go or bought out. Like Saber Interactive, they bought themselves out. They're now looking to invest in smaller projects because before the implosion, these projects were like $15 to $30 million, right? And then now they're like, okay, we're not going to. We let go of these huge projects that were that large. Now we're willing to invest into games that are like the $1 to $2 million range. And if developers are like, hey, I could, make a game, and obviously there has to be due diligence for this, but if they can make a game for $250,000 to $500,000, that's also a mark where they're like willing to make a bet because it's not as huge. Also, I would say companies with IP have been willing to make bets. We just released a game with Nickelodeon, the Rugrats game, which was a smaller indie title with a big name. In October, Paramount was actually, this wasn't with us, but shortly after they saw what we did, they started to fund independent projects. And then a lot of this has been, popping up. I think like platforms, different funds, they're looking to
Meta poured a lot of money into VR games, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so then I guess how would you rate some of these sort of different ways to get the money? Like you mentioned Kickstarter, but there's the platforms, there's publishers, there's the VCs. Like where do you go first? Like
I think it depends where you're at in your studio and your experience and also your relationships. So as far as like independent publishers, that seems like a really good bet, as well as like platforms, that's really good. If you really have a good business plan, you feel that you're going to be making, a VC 10x plus, then it makes sense, and you are gravitating your game and your pitch towards that. I'm going to say it's a game because every time you communicate with a funder, you have to kind of understand the vernacular. How do you communicate with them? They're looking for certain things that other folks are. Where like a small independent publisher like Raw Fury or Devolver or any of these guys, they're looking for creativity and talent, and they're looking for your next 3 games. You know, whereas VCs, they're looking, where's the money? You know what I mean? Like, how is this going to make money? And that also rides waves. Like, as you heard, AI. So VCs are looking for AI. Previously, it's blockchain, you know, and then every wave, they're going to be looking for certain things to invest in because they're investing in multiple studios. And that's another thing, too. Are you trying to fund your studio long-term, or are you trying to fund a project? That's going to also determine where developers go.
So, and then in what capacity are you looking for games, and what do you look for among the indies?
So I know I kind of skip past this. So I run a event called The Mix, the Media Indie Exchange. And that was, as I started my studio in San Francisco, I realized that there was a need for developers to get in contact with publishers, investors, and press. So in 2012, I teamed up with some folks, and we ran this event out of the IGN offices, and we had like an amazing group of people. We had like Towerfall and Retro City Rampage and some big indies that showed up, and it was packed. And the next year, I called it The Mix, the Media Indie Exchange, and it was even bigger. Like there was like a line. It was super grassroots. There was a line wrapped around the IGN building, and then until we couldn't even fit in the IGN building, and so we had to get other facilities, and we would start doing E3 and that type of thing. So now, you know, we do 4 or 5 shows a year. We have one coming up during the Summer Game Fest, the Grand Museum. We have 2. We have the online event and the in-person event. And we kind of now, since this is my business, it's, you know, we have an obligation to our partners. 1, the developers, 2, the press, and then 3, our sponsors, to have extremely good content. So anytime we have an event, I look through with my team around 700 games, right? So during a year, I'll probably look through 1,500 games plus. And it's interesting to see the different trends that are happening. And really, when I'm talking to developers, I'm like, you got to really do something extremely different. Because if you're trying to do some roguelite Metroidvania, you're going to get lost in the shuffle no matter how good it looks.
What kind of games are getting through?
I think more so emergent gameplay, where it doesn't take as long to develop the game, but it has, you know, it's just every time you play, it's different, right? So that is kind of the roguelike genre, but just what is your twist on it? Are you gonna make are you making like a Tony Hawk with that element? What are the emergent factors? How are you building your community? That kind of thing.
And let's see, when you're, I guess, thinking of alternative sources too, are there any we haven't mentioned yet? Or is the money really not there right now?
What do you mean?
I don't know. I mean, the nice thing I see is that there are some publishers coming back, like Acclaim, for example, just set up shop again under Alex Joseph.
Yeah,
he's got some money. He doesn't have all the money that you would think Acclaim would have, but still, he's got the Acclaim name, right? And is restarting. So, like you know, in the past, a couple of years ago, I think there was something like 30 publishers that just went out of business, right? And when a publisher goes down, they take so many indies down with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with this, so I also help to run the Humble Black Game Developer Fund for 4 years, where we funded developers' prototypes. Humble Games, basically, Ziff Davis didn't want to deal in that type of business, so Humble Games shut down. What happens to all the talent there? What happens to the publishers? Like, now there's a holding company taking care of them. It's very interesting. The thing about it, though, that's cool is, I mean, none of that is cool as far as like companies tanking and everything. But like, so for instance, Versus Evil was bought by Tiny Build. They bought a number of companies right before the crash. Those talented people who ran those studios are still out there. So now private investors want to invest in those people, and now they have money, right? It's just like, but they're privately looking for funds, so you kind of have to build your network and understand where those folks are at, what they're looking for, and what, kind of what is out there.
And we have had real successes. I mean, like some of those AAA games failed. They left a hole in the market, and the indies moved in, to take their place in the last couple years or so. Helldivers 2, Pal World, Balatro, a large number of games with a single developer behind them, like Animal Well, right? And what do you think is happening if you look at what pattern we've got now?
I definitely think there's a hole in the market, especially in the middle, like the AA space, and the tools are allowing developers to make AA experiences or large experiences on lower budgets. Also, since the world is opening up as far as communicate, I mean, it's always been there, but like you can now work with developers in Brazil, Indonesia, the Philippines, that kind of thing, and like really have a simpatico relationship where it's not just a transactional, and that has opened it up to making games very quickly and lean. I think that a lot of like independent developers fail when they're trying to like compete with market prices and that kind of thing, and not negotiate how they are doing business with the folks that they're working with and vendors, and really keeping it lean for to flip it for a win. You know what I mean? Kind of the delayed gratification of being an entrepreneur is real. You know what I mean? You don't want to get, raise $2 million and then pay yourself $350,000. You know what I'm saying? Like I've seen that kind of thing happen too.
Yeah. I just came back from Gamescom Latam in Brazil, and there was more than way over 100,000 this time. 130,000 people went to the show, right? Met with lots of startups there. I know Newzoo puts them at about $7.7 billion in revenue out of the, $180 billion or so for the whole game industry. So it's a small part of the market, but it's growing at 6% a year, and the U.S. is growing at half a percent or so a year. And looking at the Convoy data for the first quarter, there were 0 deals that VCs invested into all of South America, right? There was nothing in Australia. There was also nothing in Africa. And all of the money went into Asia, Europe, and the US, right? And I'm going like, there's a disconnect for me here. Like, this is one of the fastest growing regions in the world for games. It's got a vibrant indie, market, and nobody is putting money into it. And so that money is all homegrown money, right? That is financing whatever's in Latin America. So it's just my observation. It's crazy, right? I mean, you agree it's crazy?
I think it's crazy. I think if anyone is investing, they should invest in those indie studios. We're working with a studio right now that is like doing amazing. They're one of our partners, and they're just doing amazing work, like full production. We work with the mix. We work with developers all over the world. So Europe, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and we just see so many great games now. Like the Latin game showcase. David Lucio is running that, and there's just such great games coming up there that are now in the mix, or they're a Day of the Devs, or they're in any of these showcases because they're like top notch, right? So I think it's a mistake that folks aren't, and I think that's where things are going to go. And if people are smart, or investors are smart, they are going to start investing. But I know that there's like a lot of tax regulations and hoops that you have to jump through, which costs a little bit more if you are working with folks in, say, Brazil.
And then let's see, probably go to our last question. That like if there are ways for underrepresented communities and game developers from those communities to get funding, like is there some advice you have on that front?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to any other, anyone else making games. I think the thing is, again, like, so I started from the mix. I also started a nonprofit called Experience Studios, which has, a fund, the XP Fund. We ran an accelerator with Netflix games to help Black developers. And then I also, the nonprofit is also DBA, Black Voices in Gaming. So we have a community that works with tons of professional developers. And a lot of it is mostly access, like access to networks, knowing where the funds are, being prepared to do these pitches. But the talent is the same, and really finding the money is the same. There may be, additional funding options, like through our program. A lot of that is dried up just due to the political climate. But we're still, there's a lot of different folks. I would say also, Xbox has done a lot in the space. We've worked with them for their DAP program, the Developer Acceleration Program. And they've been doing things behind the scenes for years that people didn't know about. And those are the folks that you want to talk to. Also, PlayStation, they have something behind the scenes. They're not blasting it out to the world, but they're funding projects from underrepresented devs.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Justin.
Thank you, Justin and Dean.